Hello, Lizzie here, and today I'm going to show you how to make Finley. Finley is a downloadable pattern from my website, lizziecurtis.com. So as you can see, he's a really lovely big roomy bag. He has a candle on the back, so this will actually go on the end of your stairs, so it'll hang from the end of your stair rail. It'll also hang from doors as well, and maybe like wardrobe doors, handles, that sort of thing. So it's perfect for gathering up things. So if I had this at the bottom of my stairs, it'll be for taking things upstairs. So put everything in, lift the handle off the end of the stair post and take it upstairs and spread everything out somewhere else. Or it could be in a child's room or even your room to put all your bits and pieces in. It could take your little bits of washing. It could take things that need to be tidied away or things that just need to be stored in a safe place like Teddy. So lots of different ways of using Finley. Has a lovely pocket at the front. I've popped my socks in there. Obviously I had those on downstairs and now I want to take them upstairs, so I've popped those in the pocket. The other thing you can do with the pocket is, if it's by the front door, pop the mail in there. So when somebody comes in from work or from being away for the day, all the mail is actually nice and safe in there, so really practical. And it's really big and roomy. It's got a drawstring here, but you could put elastic in there instead of a drawstring, up to you. And of course we've got Teddy in here as well. He's waiting to go upstairs. We've got a flap as well, so when we draw this up, the flap can come over and make it really nice and tidy. So I think you'll agree it's a really good make. So what are we going to do to get started? So let's just put Finley down here and my socks. So I've got all my bits and pieces cut. Now all of the instructions, everything that you need to know is on the PDF pattern. So I've gone ahead and I've cut all my bits and pieces ready. Now I had the most gorgeous fabric here and I thought, you know what, I deserve one of these bags for my sewing room. So the fabric I've chosen is this, which is really pretty, isn't it? And this was a 1/2 metre. In the pattern I'll say you need 1 metre, but this was 1/2 metre and I thought, oh, I need to make it with this. So I found some gingham, which really goes really well. As a contrast, actually it works quite well. So think about the fat quarters that you have, think about 1/2 metres that you have that are complementary. And this fabric, I'm going to look it up and make sure I'm right with this. It's henryglassfabrics.net, and I've got a bit of the wording either end of the selvage, and it says, I think it's so lovely, but I'll look that up for you. So, and it'll be in the description box below. So I've cut all my pieces out. I've cut my inside and my outside. The inside lining, I've just used a really a lovely calico, so it's a nice strong cotton to take all the weight of maybe books and jewellery and all sorts of paraphernalia that we're going to pop into the bag. I've already stitched the lining up, but I've left a turning gap in the seam, so you can see straight away we're almost good to go with the rest of the pattern. You also need a piece of cord or elastic, that's your choice. Then I've got the piece for the strap. Now that's all the instructions again of what you need to cut are down below, and I folded that so we've got a 1-inch strap, and I'm going to top stitch that in a second. And then also we needed the channel that goes around the top of the bag to put our cord in. Again, I've got that cut, I've got it pressed in half, ready to actually stitch. So the first thing we need to do is actually stitch the pocket onto one of the pieces. And to be honest, it doesn't matter which piece, because you can decide at the very end where you're going to put the bag handle and all the other bits and bobs. So I'm turning over a 1/4 inch and then 1/4 inch again on that top edge of the pocket. Now don't forget, if you're using directional fabric, you need to make sure that it's going up the bag so you can see the pattern. And I did hesitate when I was cutting this out, just to make sure I had it going the right way. I was so pleased to be using this fabric. So straight across, and you can obviously give it an iron at this point to keep everything nice and neat. Trim your ends. Now just pick one of your pieces. There we go, that's one bag piece, you have 4, and just put the right side of your pocket on the right side of your fabric. So that's what it will look like. So there's the pocket, and it's going to be right sides onto the right sides. So just get your point lined up. If you do, you'll start from your point first, which is the very bottom of the bag. There we go. So if you start from the point, you know that's all lined up, and then you can go down the other side. Now I'm just going to stay stitch this together. So I always say it becomes like one piece of fabric. And it's much easier then to stitch all the other pieces in place. If you're confident, you don't have to do this part, but it certainly helps me. And again, just line those edges up. Like I say, all the instructions and cutting guides are in the pattern, so you'll be able to see exactly what you need to cut. Now I'm stay stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and again I'm going to start at the point just so it all lays nicely, about 1/8 of an inch. I'm not measuring, I'm just thinking that's about right, and it'll get caught into the seams. So right up the other side, and I don't do a back stitch because it's just holding all those pieces of fabric together. So let's just trim our threads. There we go. I'll pick up my threads later. So there we are. So there's the pocket installed, and this one's a little bit bigger than my original one. That's intentional because I'm thinking sewing, I'm thinking knitting, I'm thinking crochet. So lots of things can go in there. So now what you're going to do is take two pieces. Let's get one of those pieces. There we are. And we're going to do right sides together, and we're just going to join the seam from the very, very top here right down to the point. So if I lift those up, we're going to go right sides together. Let me just get that in place. I'll put a couple of clips in there, and then you'll be able to see where I'm stitching from and to. So I'm going from the very point up to the top. There we go. So if I hold that up, you'll be able to see from the very point there up to the top here. So again, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance now, because this is our proper seam. And there's no need to neaten your seam because we're lining this. Now you can do a back stitch. Just remove your clips as you go. And then do a back stitch when you get to the point. So there's one section joined together. Put that just there for the time being. And now you're taking the other two halves and you're stitching those together. So again, right sides together, like that. And you're starting from that point again. This time I won't clip these together, but you get the idea, and if you're more confident with them being clipped together or pinned together, then that's great. So just a little back stitch there. Now none of this has any stabilizer. There's no wadding, there's no batting, there's no interfacing, no stabilizer. I'm trying to think of all the different ways that we would perhaps change how our fabric is. There isn't anything, so it's quite an inexpensive make. And I think once you've made one, you'll realise how useful it is. And I think you'll make more. I think I will. This is definitely going to be staying in my sewing room. So we have two halves now. There we go. And it doesn't really matter whether they're back, front, side, they're all the same. So we're just going to join those two together. So if we get the piece that I stitched just before with the pocket, I'm just going to go right sides together with that. And this time we're going to go all the way around. So all the way down to that first point, right down to the point at the bottom and back up the other side. And don't forget the lining has the turning gap in, so we don't need to worry about that. It's just a lovely straight bit of stitching. Now I've got my stitch length on 3, only because it's a quicker demonstration if I have a longer stitch length. So you might need to reduce your stitch if you wish, or increase your stitch, that's up to you. Now be careful at this point because we're actually stitching on the bias, so don't stretch those bias seams. And I'm nesting my seams at the bottom. So in other words, I've got one going one way, one going the other, and they're nested. And then they sit beautifully. So don't forget, don't stretch these bias seams. So bring all your points together. Now I cut all my 4 layers all at the same time, so they are absolutely spot on when it comes to meeting up, which is such a great help. And right up to the top, and the perfect neat. And as I say, it's about 1/4 inch. I'm not measuring, I'm really not too worried about that. Okay, so that's my outside of the bag done with the pocket. And you can press it at this stage so the seams are really beautifully neat and tidy. And just poke out your corners here. And you kind of get a boxy bottom, but it's nothing that you need to concern yourself with stabilising again, because it's got to be a soft make. It's something to pop all your, your scarves in, your jumpers, your hats, your gloves, anything like that. So there is the outside of the bag made up. Now the next stage is to make the flap. It's only a little flap, and it's actually in the pattern, it's just a replication of the bottom of the bag, so that's quite handy. So I've cut my pieces out. I've got my calico on one side, I've got my beautiful gingham. Can you see how well that goes together? On the right side. Now, let me just check. Yeah. So I'm just going to turn it through. Now, what I'm going to do is leave that top straight edge open. I'm going to stitch all the way around, turn it through, give it a press, and then I'm going to top stitch. So I have stitched that together and I've top stitched, and you can see that it's made a really lovely professional finish. It's always worth doing that top stitching. So the next thing to do is to actually do the top stitching on the strap, and to also stay stitch your casing, your channel. We've just got to turn those ends over and make them neat, but we'll do one thing at a time. So I've folded my strap as per the instructions. So now again, all I'm going to do is top stitch. I'm not bothering with the back stitch. It just makes a really nice, neat finish. Now I don't bother taking it out of my machine, I just go along the bottom, one more stitch, and then come up the other side. Okay, lovely. So that's our strap stitched. So that's ready to go onto the bag. So we'll pop that to one side just for a moment. And then this is the channel. So each end obviously is a raw edge. So we're just going to turn that under twice, about 1/4 inch, and top stitch. Now you'll see that I've got joins in this fabric. It's because I was trying to be a little bit frugal actually and use up some of my scraps, and this gingham was really a scrap. So I've pieced it together, and at the end of the day, this is a utilitarian product. It's going to be used and abused by putting your washing in there and all your bits and pieces. So I don't mind doing that. If you get the meterage like I suggest in the pattern, you'll have tons of fabric to actually make your strap and your channels all at the same length. And that's up to you. But I couldn't resist using this gingham with the fabric. Oh dear. There we go. So I've just turned those ends over and made a really nice neat end. So now all I want to do is stay stitch. So keep those wrong sides together and just stay stitch down the raw edges. Again, about 1/8 of an inch. And what that means is that when you come to actually put all your layers together, because we're nearly done to be fair, it'll all stay together really much more easily if it's one piece of fabric, which is what we're doing when we're stay stitching. Now I've already pressed this, so I'm hoping that it's all lined up underneath. So it's raw edges, you're stitching together basically. Now if you're going to use elastic, I would still do it this way, unless you leave a gap to put the elastic in with, but I can sort of deal with that another time with you, and then you'll be able to see the alternatives that you can do. But let's just stick to the pattern for the moment, and we're going to use cord. So those channels are now stitched together in one piece, and there's my opening to put the cord through. So the next thing we need to do is to bring the bag in. Now I like to get this all clipped together or pinned together before I go any further, and a lot of this I'm actually going to stay stitch. So there's the front of the bag with the pockets. So we need to go to the panel at the back of the bag. So I'm just going to flip that over, and this is the panel that's going to go right at the back. So if we look at Finley here, oh, he's covered in bits now, in thread. So this is the piece that we're working on now, where the strap goes in, the flap goes in, the channel goes in. So there's lots of layers to consider, and it's getting them in the right order. So the first thing we need to put in is the strap. Now you may have a right or wrong side or favourite side, so think about how you're going to put it in. And you've got those seams where you've joined those pieces together, so use that as your guide. And I'm just going to pop my strap right up against the seam. I'll show you this in detail in just a second. Just make sure you don't twist that strap. So now I put my strap in place with my clips, I'm going to stay stitch that onto the bag. Let me just show you how that's positioned. So that strap is right up against that seam just there. So it's right butt up against it, and I'm just going to stay stitch, because the thing is we're putting lots of bits and pieces now onto the bag. And I'd rather just have these stay stitched in place than worry about clips and pins. So again, I'm just literally running my machine across there, and the same with the other side. So again, it's about 1/8 of an inch. It's certainly not as much as 1/4. So that's it really. So both of those straps are now nicely positioned. Like that. I'm loving this gingham with this. Kind of works, doesn't it? So let's just trim my threads, try and keep everything neat. So the next thing we need to put on is the flap. Now if you remember, with our flap we're using the gingham, so we're going to say that's our right side, and obviously our sewy fabric is our right side. So now you need to place the flap down right sides onto your main fabric. So the gingham side is going flat down onto the top of the straps. Now this will go from seam to seam. So if I put my clips in, and then I'm just going to stay stitch this as well. So at the moment I haven't done anything with the lining apart from stitch all the pieces together, just so you know. So there we are. So that's my flap now pinned in place or clipped in place. So I'm going to stay stitch that. Now you may think that's all overkill. Let's get it so I can see it. But like I say, if you've stitched them in place, you don't have to worry about them anymore, because the next stage is to put the channel in and then put the lining in as well. And I don't want you to worry about all those layers. So we're kind of building up the bulk here. So think about the sort of fabric that you'll be using. Like a cotton canvas would be awesome, but think about all those layers, especially with the straps and the channel, with something like a cotton canvas. So you need a machine that would be able to tackle that. It's very tempting, isn't it? My original one is actually curtain fabric, so it's got a little bit heavier weight to it. Just love the seagulls. So there we are, there's our flap in place. It's stay stitched, so now I don't have to worry about it. There's no pins, there's no clips to get in the way. Everything is in the right place, ready to go. So the next thing we need to put in is our channel, and we're going to do exactly the same. But this time I'm going to find the centre back of my channel, give it a little finger press, or you could get your pen, I haven't got mine handy, but you could get a pen and just mark where that, in fact let's put a pin in there, where that centre piece is. There we go. So then I'm going to find the centre of my flap, so I'm just going to fold it in half, give it a little squidge, get that heat of your fingers on there making a crease. That's lovely. And then I'm just going to marry the two together. So raw edges together. So there's my pin, there's my crease. I'm going to put a clip there and hold that in place. So I might start from there and come round, but what you could do, just flip it over, find the center of your front panel where the pocket is. So let's do that. Finger press again to get that crease. I might put a pin there because it's a lovely detailed fabric. I don't want to lose my crease line, so I'll put a pin. So that's measured the front of my bag there. And there's my pin just there. So what I'm going to do is bring my channels around to the front, and I'm just going to sit them so they don't quite touch. There's probably 1/8 of an inch between them, and I'll get my quilting clips and just put a clip there. Make sure you're not clipping all the layers together. Again, just bring that around, bring it over to the front, and just like I say, it's about 1/8 of an inch away. There we go. And that should fit really neatly on your bag. So you've got the front, oops, you've got the back clipped together. You've got the front clipped together, so now you're good to go. And obviously if you want to, put more clips in there and pins so it's nice and neat. Again, I'm stay stitching. Don't think this is a waste of time, because really all you're doing is, I'm going to take my table off, is putting all those layers together. It's really worth doing this stage. Maybe when you've made a couple of dozen of these and you'll be a pro, you won't need to do this part. So I'm going to take my pin out, leaving that other clip in there, just so we keep that central. Now you could do a little back stitch there. You shouldn't need to, because it's just a stay stitch. And when you get so far, I would see where your clip is there, make sure that's all nice and taut, just pull it so it all lines up straight. To be honest, you could zigzag this together. That's a good idea, because that gives it extra strength. So again, I'm literally going over the top of the stay stitching I did on the channel, if you remember that part. So take my clip out, and that's now joining all of those layers together, so I don't have to think about those anymore. And then the next part is just putting the lining in. It's so easy. I'm loving it, loving it. And then look, we've got the coming up to the clip right at the front here. So again, get all those layers nicely lined up together, and I'll take that clip out now, put them out of the way, and then you're coming back up the other side. Fantastic. There we go. So just take my threads off, so we keep things nice and neat. So you've got a bit of a gap there at the front, and that's perfect. So now what we're going to do is put our lining to our bag and we're done. Oh, I've got to thread the cord on. So keep your lining so the right side is on the inside, and just pop your bag inside. Now it doesn't matter whether this is the front, the back, the sides, it doesn't matter, because the lining doesn't have any pockets or anything. You could put some in. So it's just a case now of getting all the seams to meet up. So if we start off, if we find a seam, there we go. It's one of the back seams. So I'm just nesting those seams together. In fact, I might push that over because that's where all the straps and the flap is. So I'm going to start there, and I'm just going to go all the way around. And just make sure that when you get to each seam, that both seams on the outside and the inside, your lining, are meeting, and then that keeps it neat. So now I'm doing a good 1/4 inch. You might want to go to 1/2 inch here, depending on your stay stitching. So just bring that all around. I'm just making sure my seams meet. Thing is, if you've cut them all together, they'll be fine. So we're just coming around to the front of the bag. Oh, and I want you to have a quick look at something while you're there. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see. Maybe I'll point it at this camera. But look, you can see there's my gap for turning. And before after I stitched, I got my iron on it and I pressed those seams apart. So it means when I hand stitch that or machine stitch that together, I've already got my crease lines there. Makes it super easy. So it's just a little tip from you to me. Oh no, from me to you. Well, you can give me lots of your tips if you want. I don't mind. So just coming up to another seam there. And again, watch all that bulk. And as you come round, so now we're going over the bulk of the straps, the flap, the channels, the lining, the bag. It's fine. Your machine should cope with that quite easily. There's no, like I said before, there's no wadding, there's no stabilizer, there's no interfacing, there's no batting. So look, there we are, we're done. Obviously it will need a jolly good press. Let's just take some of these ends away. So where is our turning gap? Here we are. So just bring it through. I always worry at this stage, I don't know about you. I always worry, I think, have I done it right? Have I put the right bit to the right bit? Yeah, of course we have. You followed the instructions, you've watched this, you'll be perfect. There we go. Now calico, this is a real sort of, it's a seeded cotton really. It creases sometimes like crazy, but it's so strong and it's so affordable. So it might crease a little bit as you turn. That's only natural. So get my hands in there, give it a squidge. I'm loving the gingham. I'm really loving the gingham. So there we are. So there's the bag made with the strap in place. So let's just thread this cord on. And like I say, all the measurements are in the pattern. You don't have to think about a thing other than which fabric shall I choose. Now I use a little safety pin, actually it's a quilting pin, and I'm going to knot the ends of these. I've also got another little trick I shall talk to you about as soon as I've threaded this through. You'll also see if you did what I've done and you've kind of scrimped a bit and you've used scraps and you've got seams, especially on this channel here, by the time you gather this up, you won't see those. So let's just oof this along. You could use a bigger safety pin. And there's all sorts of gadgets and gizmos you can get. In fact, in my drawer, I think I've got a massive one. Ooh, frightening. You get used to what you use, don't you? So let's just bring that in. This is boring TV, isn't it? Boring TV. So we're nearly there. Oh, I'm so loving this. This is so going to be in my room. Right, let's just pull it through. just going to knot the end. I'll probably trim these off because they look a bit scruffy, so it'll sort of come undone. Let's do the other end. Sorry, you can't see. There we go. I quite like that they've separated though. Makes kind of like a little tassel. So just get your knots that you've just done on your cord and just pull that, and you'll know that you've got equal lengths. And what you can do is even just sort of bring the fabric up like that. Now, if you're worried about losing those cords, just pop this under your sewing machine just at the back of the bag, and that then keeps that cord in place. So in fact, I'll do it that way. So you're going across. I'm kind of haven't measured where the back is, but let's put it there. Try and get it in the middle because I haven't got that in the middle. So just move that down the middle of the channel. There we go. Just a few little stitches, really nothing serious. There we are. So what that means is it's a little safer if there's children around to have that cord attached. But it also means that you won't pull it out by mistake, which is so frustrating. So there we are. Pull it up. Pop the flap over. Pop it on your door handle. Pop it on the bottom of your stairs. And then we're good to go. So there we are. So don't forget to download the pattern, and I hope you make loads.